At Thanksgiving dinner, my father set down his fork, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Your job is to work while your sister enjoys life. If you have a problem with that, there's the door." No hesitation. No pause. Just the truth they had been hiding for years. Chloe didn't react. My mother stayed silent. And in that moment I understood something that changed everything. I wasn't their daughter. I was their workforce. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply stood up, walked out into the cold Portland rain, and made a decision that would unravel everything they depended on. But before I tell you what happened next, where are you listening from? And honestly, what would you have done in my place? My name is Amanda. For most of my life, people assumed I was the steady one. The girl who could lift what was heavy, fix what was broken, and keep the family business alive even when no one else bothered to try. I grew up working in a glass greenhouse on the outskirts of Portland. From the outside, it always looked warm and glowing. But when you were the one inside doing the work, it felt cold. While other kids spent weekends riding bikes and playing outside, I was hauling soil bags twice my weight, kneeling in damp earth with numb fingers. My father called it building character. Chloe never touched the dirt. She floated through childhood like a guest of honor. Private lessons, warm rooms, soft hands that had never lifted a crate. My parents always said she had potential. As if the rest of us existed just to hold her up. I remember watching her practice dance routines in the heated sunroom while I stood outside in the rain, mud soaking through my boots. I kept wondering why love came so easily to her, and never seemed to reach me. Even when we grew up, nothing changed. Chloe moved through life surrounded by comfort, praised for every small achievement. Meanwhile, I became the invisible engine that kept everything running. I managed inventory. I handled the bills. I fixed equipment and dealt with repair calls no one else even understood. My father would pat my shoulder like I was a dependable machine. My mother would smile and say I was strong, which was really her polite way of saying I could survive being overlooked. The truth was simple. I kept the family afloat because no one else would. And deep down I kept hoping that if I carried enough weight, if I solved just one more problem, maybe they would finally see me not as the labor, but as their daughter. So when we sat down at that Thanksgiving table, candles glowing and food steaming, the room filled with everything that should have felt warm and safe, I made the mistake of believing things might finally be different. Maybe the years I spent holding everything together would matter. Maybe this time they would see me. But the silence at that table had been building for years. And the moment my father leaned back in his chair, I felt the shift before he even spoke. My mother's eyes dropped, like she already knew what was coming. Chloe slowly twirled her wine glass, pretending she wasn't waiting for the moment. Then my father said it, casual and sharp like he was commenting on the weather. "Your job is to work while your sister enjoys life." For a second I thought I had misheard him. Steam from the turkey rose between us. The candles flickered. And suddenly every memory from my childhood lined up in my mind like witnesses in a courtroom. But he didn't blink. He meant it. Every word had been waiting years to come out. My mother didn't protest. She pressed her napkin into her lap and looked away, the same way she always did when she agreed with something cruel but didn't want the responsibility of saying it herself. And in that moment I finally understood. This wasn't a crack in our relationship. It was the truth of it. Chloe sat up straighter, smoothing her hair like a queen adjusting her crown. I tried to take a breath just once to steady myself. "Dad, that's not." He cut me off with a careless wave of his hand. "If you have a problem, there's the door." And there was. The sentence that didn't just bruise, it severed years of effort. Every bill I quietly paid. Every crisis I fixed. Every burden I carried when everyone else walked away. All of it dismissed with a sentence so simple it didn't even sound angry. It sounded practiced. Like he had been waiting for the day I finally questioned the arrangement. My fork slipped from my hand and clinked against the plate. No one reached to pick it up. I looked around the table, searching for even one face that showed regret, hesitation, or doubt. There was nothing. My father looked rigid and unmoved. My mother sat small and silent. Chloe was almost smiling, like she had been waiting for someone to finally say the quiet part out loud. The room suddenly felt too tight, too bright, too loud. Behind us, the glass greenhouse stretched into the dark night. Rows of plants pressed against the windows, leaves fogging the glass like silent witnesses. I had spent my life inside that place. But in that moment the truth became impossible to ignore. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even family. I was infrastructure. Necessary. Replaceable. Expected. Outside, the rain began hitting the windows harder. A familiar rhythm I'd listened to on countless nights while working long after everyone else had gone to bed. My father's words echoed in my mind with every strike of rain. Door. Sister. Door. Something inside me, something that had stayed quiet for years, finally snapped into clarity. Not rage. Recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the blueprint they had built their lives on. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my shoulders loosening as my breathing steadied. If this was the truth, then I didn't have to keep pretending we were something we weren't. I lifted my eyes and looked directly at them. That was the moment. The moment before everything broke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my hand on the table the way Chloe might have if someone ruined her evening. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, like a storm pulling back just enough to leave the air eerily still. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. Every face turned toward me. Not with concern. With irritation. Like I was interrupting dinner. Fine, I said calmly. I'll leave. I paused. And you can start paying your own bills. For the first time that night someone reacted. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes widened. Chloe froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. They all understood exactly what I meant. They just never believed I would actually say it. Slowly I reached for the heavy ring of keys clipped to my belt. They were warm from my body heat, years of responsibility hanging from a single metal ring. Keys to storage rooms. Delivery vans. Inventory locks. Tool cabinets no one else even knew how to open. I unclipped them and held them in my palm for a moment. Then I dropped them onto the table. The sound wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room like cold steel. No one moved to pick them up. I turned and walked toward the back door that opened into the greenhouse, the place where I had spent more hours than in my own bed. When I pushed it open, a blast of winter rain rushed inside, sharp and freezing. Napkins scattered across the table and 2 candles flickered out instantly. My mother gasped. My father cursed under his breath. Chloe complained that the rain was ruining her hair. But I didn't look back. I stepped out into the storm, letting the rain soak through my coat as I crossed the path toward my car. I didn't run. Running would mean fear. And with every step, fear was the one thing I felt slipping away. Inside the car, the world became quiet again. The windows fogged. The engine hummed softly. I wrapped my hands around the steering wheel, not to steady myself but to hold on to one simple realization. This was the last night I would ever carry their burdens. 40 minutes later, I unlocked the door to my studio apartment. Warm, quiet air greeted me. It smelled of potting soil and the faint citrus scent of the lemon oil I used on the shelves. My plants, my real plants, were thriving. Green vines climbed the exposed brick walls, spreading in soft patterns that felt like freedom. Nothing here belonged to the greenhouse. Nothing here belonged to them. I slipped off my wet coat and walked straight to my desk. My laptop glowed to life, its light reflecting off the leaves surrounding it. My fingers moved without hesitation. Cancel recurring payments. Revoke shared access. Remove my authorization from every account tied to the nursery. Each click felt like taking a breath I hadn't allowed myself in years. Then I opened the folder I had avoided for far too long. Inside was the paperwork for the account my grandmother had left for my future. $150,000. Gone. Drained years ago. The signature on the withdrawal form was supposed to be mine. It wasn't. Linda's handwriting always curled at the edges, delicate and careful, as if she could disguise betrayal by making it look pretty. The realization didn't hit like anger. It landed colder than that. Clarity. They hadn't just used me. They had stolen from me. Money meant for my independence had been quietly funneled into Chloe's lifestyle. I closed the folder slowly, almost gently, the way someone might close the eyes of a person they had finally stopped hoping would change. They told me to walk out the door. Fine. But they had no idea what it meant when the person holding up the entire house finally let go. I didn't hear from them for almost a full day. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt tense, like the moment before a glass shatters on the floor. I already knew the pattern. First confusion. Then irritation. Then the familiar belief that I would come crawling back because that had always been my role. On the morning of the second day, the messages started. Zone 3 irrigation isn't working. Get over here and fix it. Another message followed. Inventory is dropping. This is thousands of dollars. Stop being dramatic. Then Chloe. Mom is crying. My audition is ruined because of all this negative energy. Can you just handle it? Negative energy. That was the phrase she used for years of unpaid labor. I muted the notifications and returned to the design proposal open on my desk. My hands stayed steady. My breathing stayed calm. They could panic all they wanted. They no longer had access to the foundation. By noon, the messages stopped. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine they finally understood. But entitlement rarely disappears quietly. It mutates. The next morning, I was standing in a conference room with senior designers, reviewing structural load requirements for a rooftop garden. Then the receptionist's voice cut through the intercom. Amanda, your parents are here. They say it's urgent. The room fell silent. But my stomach didn't drop the way it used to. Instead, something inside me simply braced, like stepping into cold water on purpose. I'll handle it, I said, offering a brief apology to the partners before walking out into the hallway. The lobby was bright with winter light, all glass walls and polished concrete. And standing in the middle of it were Gregory and Linda. They looked smaller than I had ever seen them. Their clothes were wrinkled. Their faces tight with panic. Linda clutched her purse like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. Amanda, my father said loudly, trying to sound authoritative. But his voice cracked halfway through the word. This has gone on long enough. You need to come home and fix what you broke. I stopped several feet away, letting the distance speak for me. I didn't break anything, I said quietly. I just stopped holding everything together. Gregory stepped closer. We have nowhere to go, he said. The landlord wants payment. They said the account bounced. That's not my problem, I replied. You told me I wasn't family. Just labor. Remember. I paused. Remember the door you offered me? His face shifted from confusion to something darker. Fear. Don't twist my words, he said sharply. I'm not twisting anything. I reached into the folder tucked under my arm. These are your words. Then I held up the document. The withdrawal form with the forged signature. The moment my father recognized it, his shoulders sagged as if the truth had physically struck him. Linda made a strangled sound. Amanda, please. You don't understand. We needed the money. Chloe needed a chance. You stole from me, I said calmly. From a fund Grandma left for my future. You didn't ask. You didn't take a loan. You forged my name so Chloe could live in an apartment she couldn't afford. Chloe wasn't even there. But her shadow hung in the space between us. My mother's hands trembled. We were going to put it back. You had 3 years, I replied. You didn't return a single dollar. Gregory straightened, trying to recover the authority that had once controlled everything. You wouldn't dare report this, he said. We are your parents. The sentence was meant to remind me of duty. Instead, it reminded me exactly why I had walked away. I end that moment. The last illusion in my father's mind finally broke. The belief that blood alone protected him from consequences. I took a step closer, close enough for him to see that nothing about me resembled the daughter he used to command. I already filed a report with the Financial Crimes Division, I said calmly. They're reviewing the documents now. He staggered back as if I had struck him. Amanda, no. We could go to jail. You won't, I replied. Not if you leave Portland today and start taking responsibility for your own lives. I paused before continuing. I've already arranged restitution through the sale of the nursery's assets. It will cover part of the debt. Linda's voice trembled. We can't just leave. Where would we go? That's something you'll have to figure out, I said quietly. Just like I always had to. The receptionist stood nearby, pretending not to listen, though her wide eyes told another story. Gregory's face finally collapsed. Not in remorse. Remorse requires empathy. What I saw was fear. We're your family, he whispered hoarsely. That ended the night you told me the door was my option, I answered. All I'm doing now is walking through it. I nodded toward the security guards waiting discreetly near the elevators. You need to leave. Linda reached toward me as if touching my sleeve might undo the past. Amanda, please. I stepped back. I'm done being the soil you grow your comfort in, I said. If you want a life, build it yourselves. Security gently guided them toward the exit. Gregory walked stiffly silent. Linda sobbed quietly into her scarf. The glass doors slid shut behind them with a soft hiss. For the first time in my life, watching them leave didn't hurt. It felt like a greenhouse door closing on a storm I no longer had to survive. Hours later, after the lobby emptied and the winter sun disappeared behind the skyline, I returned to my desk. My colleagues didn't ask questions. They simply gave me space, the kind my family had never offered. I opened my laptop not out of habit but with intention. My future was no longer tied to theirs. No more payments. No more rescues. No more years wasted on loyalty that only flowed one way. As I sat there surrounded by sketches of gardens I hoped to build someday, a realization settled over me with perfect clarity. I hadn't destroyed their world. I had simply stepped out of it. And without me holding everything together, it collapsed under the weight of its own neglect. In the weeks that followed, reality replaced the fantasy they had lived in for years. Without my income supporting them, the nursery couldn't survive a single audit. The land was sold to cover debts. The greenhouse glass was dismantled and sold to another grower outside the city. For the first time in decades, Gregory and Linda had to live like ordinary people instead of monarchs ruling a kingdom I had built for them. Gregory found part-time work as a night attendant at a warehouse on the industrial edge of Portland. Linda started helping at a small co-op market on weekends, sorting produce with the same hands that had once forged my signature. Chloe moved north, sharing a cramped apartment with roommates while balancing auditions and retail shifts. None of it was cruel. It was simply the natural consequence of their choices. I didn't celebrate their struggle. But I didn't rescue them either. My energy went somewhere better. Into the 5 acres of land I bought outside the city. Wild. Uneven. Overgrown. But mine. The first morning I walked across that land, mist rising from the soil, I knelt and pressed my palms into the earth. For the first time in years I felt something different. Not obligation. A beginning. Now I return there often. I watch the first shoots push slowly through the soil. Quiet, patient, certain. Feels nothing like the life I left behind. Out here, growth doesn't demand sacrifice. It asks for patience. For intention. For honesty. The same things I finally chose for myself. Their choices shaped their path. Mine opened a new one. And in the quiet of the future I built with my own hands, I can finally say the words that changed everything. Sometimes freedom is as simple as walking through the door someone told you to use.